Yeah, I was at the last point talking on remedy sought and the um, the potential for it to address systemic issues and the fact that it should reflect the priority of the affected population and how the judgment implementation be monitored. That needs to be to be taken care of prior to the litigation itself. So there needs to be a plan around it. And the last bit that I want to touch on, or probably the third section, sorry, is that of the potential benefit of strategic litigation, in which I'll solely be focusing on the Purohit case, just to look at more in terms of the impact that this case or this decision has created at the regional level, and how that translated in law, policy, and practice reform at national levels. I will not get into details of the case itself, since Anne Campbell already touched on that in the first session. But before I dive into the impact of this case, I would like to first of all highlight the fact that this was a case that was filed by tourists who visited the Gambia and saw the conditions, or found the conditions in this psychiatric hospital to be very, very alarming. And what they did was they filed their petition, or they sent their petition to the Secretariat of the African Commission of Human and People's Rights via fax. So the Commission ruled on its admissibility and decided to look into the merits of the case. And with regard to this case, once the decision was delivered, the Commission delivered its decision. It's worth noting that the Gambian government invited the World Health Organization, that's WHO, to come in and provide them with some sort of advice on how they can go about reforming the system, because they thought they needed an organization with the skill and knowledge on how to do this, which, even though the decisions of the African Commissions are more of recommendations, but you see it has some sort of, or in this case it created some sort of an impact by having the government to take action. And this decision, this was a decision that came out in 2002, 2003, and up to date, it has been used in several African countries, including Kenya, Uganda, Zambia, Ghana, to push for mental health law reform process. It has been used as an advocacy tool by domestic organizations to advance mental health rights. And even some of the challenges, like for example, some of the basic challenges that or some of the basic rights violations in terms of the laws themselves. I'm talking about mental health laws, which, if we look at the language in most of the mental health laws in post-colonial African countries, using words like imbecile, idiots. This decision has, the Purohit and More case has helped a lot in providing some sort of evidence or foundation for the reasoning for both courts, government officials, and even those that have been engaged in the communities, to educate them on how derogatory and the impact of using such derogatory words. So the Purohit case has been at the center in pushing for law reforms and the whole process of mental health law reforms, to be specific. And so we look at all this. There's this emergence, or this cropping up of mental health laws in different countries that have come up. In some countries like Ghana, even it has been enacted. They have a mental health law, which, if you look at the whole process, how long it took decades. The whole reform process took decades in order to come up with a mental health law. And in some countries, even like Uganda, they're still in this process. Like, this is a process that started decades ago, but it's very, very challenging on the part of the professionals, on the part of the advocates, on the part of the human rights organizations, on what standards they want, which is the Puri case has been very, very instrumental, or has been used as an advocacy tool to try to push for these necessary mental health law reforms. And it has also been used to raise a lot of public awareness on mental health rights regionally, and has helped a lot to empower the marginalized group. Like, if you see, okay, now in the African continent, they have these organizations of persons with psychosocial disabilities, which has also helped to set up national consumer-led organizations, as national users organization, people who've experienced mental health problems, help to set up these organizations, which I think this decision, or this case, the Puri and Moore case, helped a lot in building this movement. And the most recent example is the case of the case that was took by Seud and Igadania, challenging the Ugandan Penal Code and the Trial Indictment Act in Uganda. But with regard to the Penal Code, we're talking of the language used in Section 130 of the Penal Code, which refers to people with mental disabilities as idiot, imbecile, and what. The Court of Uganda actually based its reasoning. This is a 2015 decision. It came out in October 2015. And when you read the judgment of the decision, you realize that the court solely relied on the Puri and Moore case in making or in ruling that using such words as imbecile, idiot, it's obsolete. So he had to make amendments to the penal code to change that language, citing the Puri and Moore case, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and all the changes or the involvement in terms of mechanisms, like human rights mechanisms and instruments that are in place to advance mental health rights. So with regard to what can you and MDSA do to advance mental health rights, or the rights of people with mental disabilities in Africa using strategic litigation, I think we just have to continue to identify cases, share and discuss these cases and the strategies, which I know this is something that MDSA is quite interested in, working with lawyers from these different countries, these different African countries, as they've already established relationship with lawyers in Kenya and Zambia and Uganda, but they would like to expand beyond these countries, and they're willing to engage in this partnership and collaboration to advance the rights of people with mental health problems, especially to combat mental disability torture in Africa. And secondly, MDC is willing, from what I know, is willing to continue to build on existing cases, to develop progressive jurisprudence, which, as I mentioned earlier, is just for you to share some of the cases that you've been working. If you identify any case, share it with MDSA, and you guys can discuss it, looking at more in terms of how do you come up with rights-based arguments, and what are some of the potential challenges, and how, I think one important thing is how can you guys work together to to build progressive jurisprudence. As I was saying, an example is with regard to the Porid and Moore case, that the African Commission ruled that the African Charter was not meant to cater for situations where people have been deprived of their liberty, like in the case where these people with mental health issues have been detained or locked up in the psychiatric hospital in Gambia. That the African Charter, that's provision in the African Charter that prohibits arbitrary deprivation of liberty, was not meant to cater for this type of situations where someone has been deprived of their liberty in order to be provided or in order to be accorded care and support. But then, with this emergence of disability rights, the coming force of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, currently they have the African Disability Protocol, which I'll say that the Porid and Moore case also had a lot of impact when you look at the whole negotiating process when we're coming up, the whole drafting process itself, and the impact this case had in pushing for certain standards to be included in the African Disability Protocol. So based on this emergence, MDAC and lawyers like you should be reflecting more in that light on how can they help to build the jurisprudence. So this is also an area that can be taken back or can be strategically litigated up to the level that it gets to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights to address the issue of deprivation of liberty based on disability, which is something that Article 14 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability clearly frowns at and outlaws. Then one other thing is we have to continue to build the capacity of judges in order to effectively provide access to justice to people with mental disabilities who've experienced torture or been subjected to torture. But in order to do that, the judges needs to have access to the right information or to up-to-date information, arguments that have been used or successful arguments that have been used in other contexts, and how they can translate and adapt them within the African context or within the context of this country, specifically like Uganda, Kenya, and Zambia. So I'd just like to give this example of what happened in Kenya when MDAC launched the legal capacity report in 2014. So in the launch event, we had like 2 judges of the High Court of Kenya that attended, and these are quite progressive judges, and one of them also attended a legal capacity briefing that was organized by the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, which from a personal discussion that I had with him, or even during the launch event, he was very open and honest to and confessed that this is like a new area, this is like an eye-opener. So we should not sit and assume that judges know everything, and we should have to invite them for trainings, for the events, like this type of event. We want to launch a report, how do you engage the lawyers? Even just by taking up cases, it helps to build the capacity of judges, especially as you draw in from arguments or jurisprudence, or as you draw in from progressive jurisprudence from other African countries. So, for example, this judge that I've been talking about, after he attended this launch event and then the legal capacity briefing by the Kenyan Human Rights Commission, there was an appeal case that came to his court on, this was to do with the Sexual Offences Act, the Kenyan Sexual Offences Act of 2006, and the provision to do with capacity to engage in sexual intercourse, which has its limitation that someone with a mental impairment or mental incapacity is considered as not having the capacity to consent to engage in such activities or engage in sexual intercourse. So there was this case that a lady was alleged to have been raped, but then the person that was accused of raping, of committing this act, claimed that the lady who was being identified as someone with a mental problem actually consented to the act. So the lower courts, the magistrate courts and the prosecutor, they simply applied the sexual offences, the section of the Sexual Offences Act that has as exception people with mental health problems, and the mere fact that this lady has been identified as having a mental health problem. So when it came before this judge, who've now been, I'll say, probably enlightened more in terms of what is legal capacity, what it entails, he was fast to rule that he was fast to rule in his judgment that he was fast to rule in his judgment that the mere fact that someone has a mental disability or mental impairment does not automatically mean that this person lacks capacity to consent. So in his own words, this is what he actually says. In conclusion, I would be remiss if I did not mention that the approach taken by the prosecution and the learned magistrate is that the complainant is an object of social protection rather than a subject capable of having rights, including the right to make decisions whether to have sexual intercourse. This approach is inconsistent with the provision of Article 12 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which requires states parties to recognize persons with disabilities as individuals before the law, possessing legal capacity to act on an equal basis with others. I think this is quite a bold step ahead in advancing the right to legal capacity, because they can use the same judgment or the same reasoning to apply it in different aspects of life, not just in the area of making decisions to engage in sexual intercourse, but might also make medical related decisions or healthcare decisions, making financial decisions, making decisions to get into marriage, and all the list goes in. If you look at all the areas in which people with mental health problems have been restricted or deprived of their right to make decisions. So when you have judges that have been whose capacity have been built, it's much more easier to build progressive jurisprudence.